One summer day about 15 years ago, I took my daughter out to play golf, practice. She was on the golf team for her high school, and it was a nice summer day. And we were practicing putting because she was good at most of her long game, but her short game needed some work. So I took her over to the practice putting green, and she was hitting them all over the place. And then she hit one, and it went right in the cup. A really long putt, right in the cup. And she got so excited. She started jumping up and down and ran over to give me a hug, and she lost her breath. She couldn't breathe. She was hyperventilating. I tried to calm her breathing down, but it didn't work. So I took her to the emergency room at Audubon Hospital here in Louisville. I was a little bit worried because it was a busy emergency room, and I thought maybe she would pass out waiting for someone to help her. But they took her right back. They put her on oxygen, and her breathing calmed down. So I asked the nurse, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, it's an ozone alert day. You're not supposed to be out in this stuff." And I had heard of ozone alert days, but I never really paid much attention to what it meant. But from that point on, I did. And it increased my awareness of carbon emissions and air pollution. And from that point on, I worked to become zero carbon neutral. What does it mean, zero carbon? Well, carbon emissions come from burning fossil fuels. So every time we drive our cars, we use electricity, we're creating carbon. So my wife and I, the first thing we looked at was our electricity use, because 90% of our electricity was coming from coal back then. We did a little bit of calculation and found that we were using 770 kilowatt hours of electricity every month. That's lower than the 890 per month for the national average. So we were doing pretty good, but we wanted to really reduce that. So the first thing we did was replace our light bulbs. Compact fluorescent bulbs, then LEDs. We got Energy Star appliances because they're more efficient. Both of those cost more to purchase, the bulbs, the appliances, but they cost less to operate. But we didn't stop there. I quit using a clothes dryer. I started using a clothesline. We started turning off lights when we're not using them. And we cut way back on our air conditioning. We put in ceiling fans, lots of insulation. And over time, and it was about 4 years, we were able to reduce our electricity use by 70%. That brought it down to 225 kilowatt hours per month. But we didn't stop there. We went out and got solar panels. Those 11 solar panels gave us about 150 kilowatt hours per month. So that reduced us to 75. From 770 to 75 kilowatt hours per month. That's a 90% reduction. But we didn't stop there. We contacted LG&E, and they have a program called the Green Energy Program, where you can pay an extra $5 or $10 per month and get renewable energy credits. These credits they invest directly in clean energy solutions. And it's certified by a third party, so we know they're not cheating. And so for $5 a month, you can get 300 kilowatt hours. And so we've been paying $10 per month, even though that's more electricity than we needed. And I'll talk about that in a little while. But then I looked at my car. I have to admit, I was driving an SUV. I like the outdoors, so I like to take it camping. And I drove it a lot. I used to fill it up once a week. So that's a lot of gasoline. Again, a lot of carbon emissions. So I started finding ways to reduce my gasoline use. and see how many days I could go on one tank of gas, I started driving more slowly, started anticipating traffic so I could coast to a stop instead of always having my foot either on the gas or on the brake. I got my tires and kept them fully inflated. I started combining trips. Instead of every time I need to go somewhere, I would hop in the car. I would wait, make a list, go every few days or once a week for my errands. After about 8 years of that, I was able to get 12 fill-ups a year. So that's, instead of filling up every week, fill up every month. So I went from 52 fill-ups a year to 12 fill-ups a year. That was a big improvement, but it still wasn't enough. So I started riding the bus, riding my bike, walking places. Instead of going across town for a doctor, I found a doctor I can walk to. Same with a dentist. Instead of driving across town for dinner or a movie, my wife and I would walk somewhere close to home. And 3 years later, I went one entire year on one tank of gas. Unfortunately, that's not a good idea for the car. I had to call the AAA every time I needed to use my car because it wouldn't start. It sat so long. So eventually, I just got rid of my car. I've been without a car for over 10 years now. So I bike places, I walk places. If I need to, I take the bus. My wife and I also looked at the ways we travel. If you compare the various modes of getting around, flying in an airplane is the worst. Taking a bus is about a third of the carbon emissions. So we started riding Greyhound and Megabus. Taking a train is about 1/5 of the carbon emissions. So we started learning Amtrak. A couple summers ago, we went all the way to Seattle on Amtrak, through the Rocky Mountains. It was a beautiful trip. We really enjoyed it. And we started doing staycations, vacations in town, at home, or at maybe a bed and breakfast downtown. But those trips still have a carbon footprint to them. Even though it's 1/5 of the emissions, it's still a carbon footprint. So you remember that extra electricity that we're buying from LG&E, from clean sources? We're using that to offset our travel. We had a gas-powered lawnmower and we converted to an electric. My wife's car, and she was getting about fill-ups about once a month. We got rid of that car and we bought an electric one. We found a used one for $6,000 and it fills most of our needs. But I know what you're thinking. That's more electricity. So that's more carbon. And you'd be right. And we knew that. And so we contacted a couple charities that we're familiar with. And we were able, for $5,000, to install a 2-kilowatt solar array on one of our charitable organizations. We didn't have enough rooftop for more solar panels on our house, but this charity is getting that solar energy. And so that's helping offset the carbon footprint from that electricity we use for our car. We have about 120 miles a month we can drive on that electricity. So eliminated our electricity from fossil fuels, eliminated our vehicles and lawnmower from burning gasoline. But there's still a carbon footprint. Most of the things that we buy have a carbon footprint. When you buy something, they have to manufacture a new one. And most of that's done with fossil fuels. So I made a vow. I'm not going to buy anything new ever again. Everything I'm going to buy is used so I can reuse, but mainly I'm going to reduce. just not buy as many things. Do without. All of the clothes I wear, I get secondhand. All of the electronics I own are refurbished. And then we looked at our food. The average food item travels 1,500 miles before it gets to your home. That's a lot of carbon. So, every Saturday, all year long, my wife and I will either walk or bike up to the farmer's market and get as many vegetables as we can for the week. We've even learned how to can vegetables so we can eat things out of season. Buying local can really reduce your carbon footprint. And we start growing vegetables and fruits in our yard. So raspberries, blueberries, grapes, apples, tomatoes, potatoes, peppers. We have about 20 different varieties that we grow in our own yard. And then we looked at our meat consumption, because a pound of meat produces 10 times as much carbon as a pound of vegetables. And not overnight, but slowly over the years, we've been able to eliminate meat from our diet. We've vastly reduced the amount of dairy that we eat also. So, did I do it? Am I 100% carbon free? It's hard to really tell. And I'm not sure if that's really all that important. But what is important is that I'm on the journey. For me, always looking for ways to reduce my carbon footprint and stop contributing to the problem. Thank you.